And yes, here we go.
Oh, there you go. Here we go. Hold on to your seats. Woohoo! Yep, yep. Here she comes. Here she comes. Woo! Yep. Throw 'em in the water. Yep. Matsuoka. And
And here we are this morning once again with Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Squire, a consultancy firm in Midtown Tokyo. So thank you very much for joining us. To everybody watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and listening in Clubhouse. Timothy, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us again. All the more that you're out on the boat this time, on board, and not in the boat or underwater or wherever else it might be. So thank you very much for joining us for the 157th episode of Japanese Politics One on One. I'm not going to keep you waiting there. So I can see that you're very eager to start
I'm
talking.
so
So
eager.
yes, the floor
So
is
much
yours.
is so much. Thank you, Maya. So much has been happening. But just to give you a little bit of an update, I do apologize last week because due to the rain, I was locked inside the cabin of the boat that Evan Burkowski and I are working on. It's actually Evan's boat. And so today I can be out on the deck and reporting to you on Japanese politics. But just to give you a little bit of an update, this is a 44-year-old, 33-foot Peterson yacht that Evan is resurrecting from the dead. And we go through the licensing qualification next week so that we can actually sail it. So um, it requires a lot of work. Restoration requires a lot of work and patience and lots of tools. But it's a great way to um, keep out of trouble because I don't have time to do anything else but this. But it's a great pastime. So thank you very much for sticking with us. And as you know, I made this commitment to Maya that every Sunday we would be doing this briefing, no matter what I'm doing. And I'm doing lots of other things on Sunday, Maya. But anyway, a commitment is a commitment. And as a
Yes,
consequence of
that
that, 3 years, we made 3 years
we did.
last episode. And this
Yes.
is our three
Believe it
year
or
and first episode. Yes, thank you very much, Maya. You are such a slave
no, thank
driver.
you. Yes, I know that the stick is always there, no carrots.
That's right. No goddamn carrots. So anyway, welcome everybody. Today is February 11th, 2024. This is episode Maya 157. This is fantastic, and thank you very much for sticking with us and for being a part of this cadre of people. I mean, everybody's interested in Japan in some degree. I mean, Japan is really such a hot item internationally, and one of the hot spots for tourists. It's a Oh, by the way, happy Chinese New Year. Um, at this time of the year, the Chinese are traveling all over the world, including Japan, but their numbers are down significantly. Maybe 40% they are down from pre-COVID travel during the Chinese New Year. And it is unlikely, they say, that the Chinese will come back in the numbers that were um, just beginning to explode before COVID hit. But happy Chinese New Year. But things have just really gone into a high gear in Japanese politics, and I want to bring you up to speed on that. But um, we talk about Japanese politics frequently, and one of the reasons that I can talk to you somewhat informatively about Japanese politics is because I go to these briefings maybe 5 or 6 times a week that are hosted by members of parliament. And for the last 2 or 3 weeks, there have been no political parties, no political briefings that you pay for joining, and everybody is avoiding that. So there have been a couple of political briefings that were on my schedule that were actually canceled at the last minute. I think we will get back up to speed on that because this is important for the politicians. It's important for their constituents. It's important for getting the word out on what's going on in policy and what's happening in Japanese the political world. It's an important news item, and the papers don't report on it as much as what happens on TV, and also as the politicians make these briefings to the public at large. So I imagine that we will be getting more into the political briefings part of it, but currently the temperature is so high and the tensions are so tight. The prime minister was in the hot seat throughout the week, particularly on Monday and Tuesday in the budget committee hearings. So as you know, the budget needs to be passed by April 1st, and this diet session is specifically to pass the diet, to consider the diet and pass it. And so that is one of the top priorities for this 150-day diet session. So the diet session exceeds passing the budget. There's another 2 months left in the calendar after they pass the budget, and usually that's when things really begin to heat up, when the work is done. So to bring you back to where we ended this program last week before the snowstorm on Tuesday, you will recall that I said that the opposition parties had demanded to the prime minister, we want a list of all of the people who have been receiving kickbacks. We want the list of their names. We want to know how much, we want it disclosed, how much they did receive in forms of kickback. And we want also for them to tell us how they used their money. And if you don't do this by Monday, so we had our broadcast on Sunday, this announcement was made on Thursday and more pointedly on Friday. If you don't do this by Monday, the opposition parties are all going to en masse not participate in budget hearings. We're not going to be working on the budget with you, and you're going to be blamed for that. So it comes to Monday, and the prime minister is in the hot seat. He did cough up some of the names, but it was lukewarm. It wasn't very enthusiastic, and still the opposition is incensed by that. Hearings were postponed for about 2 hours as they kind of worked it out. But what the opposition parties demanded and what they got from the prime minister was pretty lukewarm. What they did get was 80 names from people belonging to the Abe faction and the Nikai faction. That's it. And we already know that there were 5 factions that were involved in the kickback scandal, including the prime minister's faction. So 80 members were, names were listed, and the timeline of reporting for what they received in kickbacks spanned less than 2 years. And the demand was at least 5 years. The statute of limitations for this kind of a violation is 5 years. And so they didn't even come up with that. And there's no word about, who in the Motegi faction or in the Aso faction or in the Kishida faction might have also been receiving kickbacks. So the opposition party is really mad, and it was splashed on the papers. The prime minister's approval rating also took a hit as a consequence of that. So his approval rating and the approval rating of his administration overall is the lowest it's been since the LDP has been in office for the last 15 years. So this is a real slap at the prime minister. So just to tell you how things happened in such a rapid succession, you remember that on January 18th, Mr. Kishida disbanded his own political party, his own political faction, in anticipation that Abe faction would disband anyway. So he jumped the gun on that, tried to take the high road, and assumed that maybe Aso and the Motegi faction would follow suit, which they did not. But that was on the 18th. On January 25th, Miss Obuchi, who belongs to the Motegi faction, decided that she was going to leave his faction, and she took 5 other members with her. So this is a big shock to the system. And the Motegi faction, Mr. Motegi is the Secretary General of the LDP, probably the second or third most powerful person in Japanese politics. to have this kind of just a dissolution of what a strong faction he had, and to have the daughter of the former prime minister resign from your political faction is a pretty big slap in the face. On February 1st, Seiwakai, Mr. Abe's faction, the Abe faction, known as the Abe faction, had its final gathering. And they closed their doors on Thursday. They always meet on Thursday over breakfast. That was their final meeting as a faction. 3 days later in Gunma, there was a mayoral election where the LDP lost. Gunma is LDP territory. It's always been LDP territory. Gunma itself has produced 5 prime ministers just in Gunma. And Gunma is the election district of Miss Obuchi. And Miss Obuchi is the election campaign chairperson within the LDP, a very high position, and also in charge of how elections are run, what's the strategy, that sort of thing. So for the LDP to lose in Gunma in a mayoral election, the incumbent was a 4-time mayor. 3 times he had succeeded himself, 64 years old, and he lost to a newcomer into politics, and a female at that. So this is the first female to be elected a mayor in this district, Maebashi. Let me see, she's 41 years old, Akira Ogawa, and both of the candidates ran as independents, but everybody knew that the incumbent was supported by Komeito and the LDP, and all of the opposition parties supported Ms. Ogawa in her campaign, and they came out on top. So this is a big shake to the LDP overall. So the people inside the LDP, political members of the Diet, that sort of thing, they've got to be scratching their heads thinking, what are we going to do with this guy that's running the prime ministership? We are beginning to see these cracks appearing that are unmistakable, and we've got to do something about it. The prime minister himself is also very worried about that sort of thing. And what we've got coming up is the budget hearings, as I mentioned to you. They need to pass the budget by the 29th. The 29th is the last day within the Diet that they can pass the Diet, and then it turns into April 1st. The budget needs to be passed by then. They are hoping, the prime minister is hoping, that they can rush it through very quickly because there are other things they want to get to, perhaps a supplemental budget, definitely some help for the Noto Peninsula. But with this opposition party saying, look, you need to tell us the names of the politicians who received the kickback, how much they received individually, and what they did with the money. And I don't think they're going to give up on that. And so the prime minister has got that to deal with as well. Following the passing of the budget, assuming the budget passes and we move into April, on the 1st of April, it's 10 days away before the prime minister goes to Washington, D.C. on a state visit with President of the United States. These two leaders of superpowers will be meeting together. Probably, it's a state visit, so 2 or 3 days, I guess they'll be together. And then he will fly back to Tokyo, arriving in Tokyo maybe the 13th, possibly. The last day that he can announce a general election is the 15th, because there's 14 days, there's 13 days of a campaign period for lower house members. So if he's going to have a general election on the 28th, he needs to announce that and call the election on the 15th, so that all candidates, everybody that's in the lower house becomes a candidate. So during that period of time, they've got to rush and put up their promotional placards, their posters throughout their election district. They need to go out and kiss a lot of babies over a 13-day period, and then on Sunday, the election. The election is going to happen anyway, but currently it's only 3 people who are running to fill seats that have been vacated either by death or by resignations. There are 3 seats that are there. And there's plenty of speculation that the prime minister will close the House to take advantage of the fact that he is pictured throughout the entire world, holding hands with Joe Biden. And this gust of wind that he is expected to get, it's a good opportunity for him to close down the House, have the LDP run all of their candidates again, the opposition parties too, and he would come out at least on par or better. I don't know why anybody would run an election if they're not going to end up better than they were when they started, but that is the calculus now. If the LDP runs an election today, they will lose maybe 20, 25 seats. I think even with visiting Joe Biden and they hug each other, they throw the baseball, or they're walking hand in hand around the tidal pool, the tidal basin, I still think the LDP will lose 20 seats, 15, 20 seats. It's just with the Unification Church and the scandal with the kickbacks and a lot of the other things that have been lingering with the LDP, it's difficult to see the LDP not losing some seats. So that's the gamble for Mr. Kishida. Should he pull the plug now and hope for not losing 20 seats or 25 seats, but maybe they lose only 18 seats? He remains prime minister, and as a consequence of having held the election, when his term comes up in September, October, so I always say September, October, it's towards the end of September when his term ends, but when the election for prime minister, it's a date that has not yet been set, so we're not sure when that is. But his term of office will come up, and he wants to be president of the LDP again, and thus extend his term as prime minister. So that's his big gamble, and I don't know how well it's going to go for him. The Expo is once again in the news. We always talk about the Expo when there's something going on there. It's going to be in 2025, in the spring of 2025, run for 6 months. It's supposed to be a big economic boost to Osaka, and also a showcase for Japanese technology, culture, arts. But other countries come into Japan and they open up their pavilions too. It was just announced this last week that they need another 200 million yen. I'm sorry, 200 million. It's about $1.3 million. It needs to go into their promotional budget. So this brings the promotional budget from 3.8 billion yen to 4.0 billion yen for promotional activities related to the Expo. The total cost of the Expo is now, it was 164 billion yen. It's now 164.9 billion yen. And the costs just keep coming up. Every time we talk about it, fewer and fewer countries are willing to submit their architectural plans or to commit to spending a lot of money on building their own private pavilion, rather going in with other countries jointly on pavilions to showcase their own country's technology and products. And it looks like with the Noto Peninsula disaster, the number of workers that are required there could be siphoned off from the Expo. We talk from time to time that the Expo would be postponed, not canceled, but postponed. There's been so much already spent on it. And that specter still continues to come up. I think a lot depends on what Mr. Kishida does with the elections. I think if he calls for elections, Ishin is gearing up for elections. They're already ready. The Constitutional Democratic Party just released last week their entire cabinet. When they run, they're going to win elections, and this is going to be our prime minister, this is going to be our secretary of state, our foreign minister, that sort of thing. They've already published what their agenda is going to be. So people are gearing up for that. And I think if the prime minister decided that he would use the opportunity of the by-election on April 28th to call for a snap election, I think he would probably similarly make a move to postpone the Osaka EXPO, just because it would be such a blow to Ishin. Ishin, as you know, essentially runs Osaka. The prefectural government, the mayor, the governor are all from Ishin, and they are loaded for bear for the next couple of elections in the future. So it's a big deal for the prime minister. Another thing that happened this week was related to the Unification Church. The education minister is Masahito Moriyama. He is with the Kishida faction. 5 times he's been reelected. He's 69 years old. He's Minister of Education. And he was questioned on Monday about his relationship with the Unification Church. And when this whole thing blew up and Mr. Motegi insisted to try and calm things down, he insisted that anybody within the LDP who had any relationship with the Unification Church write their name on a piece of paper, explain exactly what Unification Church relationship they had, describe it in detail, only 1 page though, and also write at the bottom a commitment that you have disengaged from any relationship with the Unification Church. And if you don't do that, if you don't submit it by this date, the LDP will eject you from the LDP. And many people complied with that. So there was a little bit of disclosure there, not as much as everybody wanted, but this issue is still alive. The Minister of Education, Moriyama, did submit his relationship with the Unification Church, but he was quizzed about that on Monday and Tuesday, and on Tuesday it became really heated because opposition party from the Constitutional Democratic Party asked him, didn't you receive a letter of recommendation from the Unification Church during the election of 2021? He says, no, I'm not sure I remember that. And this individual from the Constitutional Democratic Party, Nagatsuma Akira, pulled out a photograph of him at the Unification Church with a recommendation signed by him that contained policy proposals that he accepted should he become elected. They're policy proposals about education, about the Constitution, about LGBTQ that he endorsed, and as a consequence of that, the Unification Church endorsed him for his election, and he became elected. He became elected as a consequence of that. I don't know, but the fact is that he did that. He got their support. He signed this policy proposal as a kind of endorsement, and then he didn't report about it. And when it was just a terrible situation because he was quizzed. He's standing in front of the Diet. You can get in a lot of trouble. You can lose your badge if you lie under questioning. And he was quizzed by Nagatsuma sensei. Were you there and did you do this? He said, no, I'm not sure I did that. I'm not sure. And here's the photograph. Well, he says, if the photograph was there, then I guess, but I'm not really sure I remember. So it's really a mealy-mouthed excuse. They are insisting on his resignation as Minister of Education. Mr. Kishida really didn't provide much of a commitment. He said, look, I asked him to be Secretary of Education because he's competent in that field, and I believed when I appointed him that he had no ties with the Unification Church. And the shot back from that was, look, he signed an agreement. It still exists. He still has those commitments, and you should fire him immediately. So I'm expecting a little bit of fireworks coming out of that little issue pretty soon. Once again, the opposition demanded the names of everybody, and all they got were the 80 people from the Nikai faction, the Abe faction. They got a year and a half of their record numbers of amount of kickback, and so that fight still exists too. And let me see, where are we now? Mr. Motegi and Mr. Aso actually Mr. Motegi went on television 2 weeks ago and said, "Yes, I intend to disband the Motegi faction at some point. It just requires a little bit more thought." And in fact, he backtracked on that, and Mr. Aso and Mr. Motegi both said publicly that they have no intention of disbanding. And in the meantime, uh, Mr. Motegi has suffered. As I said, Ms. Obuchi left. She took 5 people with her. 2 more have left since then. And importantly, in the Motegi faction, it was started by Miss Obuchi's dad and a fellow by the name of Aoki. And Mikio Aoki, his son is in the Motegi faction, and Mr. Obuchi's daughter is in the Motegi faction. And these 2 individuals left. They just, even though it's the faction that their fathers started, they resigned and took several members with them. So there are real cracks that are showing up in the Motegi faction. He's got some real issues he has to deal with. I think he probably will ultimately disband the faction. But what we've learned over the last couple of weeks is disbanding the faction might mean that they close the office, they move the furniture to another place. They still have breakfast, but it's a breakfast on Tuesday rather than on Thursday. They don't call themselves a faction, they call themselves a political support group or a team. And I think that under Japanese law, there's really nothing you can do about that in any event. Political factions, these kind of groupings, are part of politics in any event. And I think just the way factions have been handled under a legacy that was initiated by the Abe faction before it was the Abe faction. I think it was started during the Mori era, maybe 20 years, 25 years ago. So that's the status of the factions. Mr. Aso has lost one. So in the general context of what's going on in Japanese politics, the LDP was ruled by a coalition of 6 political factions. That is no longer the description. There's 2 political factions that exist. The other factions have disbanded and have reformed as policy groups with the ability to assimilate with other like-minded Diet members. So if you're in a faction, you can get censured for joining another faction or participating or talking out of turn, not voting as the faction dictated during the breakfast briefing on any political issue or policy issue that comes up. So the whole dynamic of Japanese politics is in real flux, and it is not settled down, and we can't really predict where it's going. But it is a lot of rock and roll. Maya, you remember we had a discussion just this last week, which was significantly different than the kind of conversation we had 2 weeks ago. So there's so much going on. I'm glad that I'm in a position to report it to you, and that we have an audience that's interested in that sort of thing. So I'd just like to wrap up this part of the briefing, move on to the Q&A, where we really get a lot of value from there too. You can see Evan in the background working his butt off.
Right. Okay, so thank you very much, Timothy. And well, we are still waiting for questions and comments, so please feel free. To everybody in Clubhouse, just a little bit of housekeeping. In Clubhouse, well, basically this application is the only way for us to get in direct touch with you, and for you to ask questions directly to Timothy. Of course, on LinkedIn and YouTube, we still accept questions, which once there, I read out to Timothy. So please feel free to come up on stage if you are in Clubhouse and comment, also share your thoughts with us. That's really always a very welcome thing to do. And
the great thing about providing these comments either on LinkedIn or on YouTube is that they stay there. So other people that come in and listen to the briefing, they can see what the questions were as well. And I think it enriches the dialogue and provides a lot more information to everybody.
Yes, it does indeed. Okay, so Timothy, you talked about, the elections and how basically Mitsubishi, she took 5 members out of Motegi faction, her father's faction.
Right.
uh, and also that well, the Abe faction disbanded and so on. We also know last week actually you mentioned that a lot of people expect Miss Yuriko Koike, Tokyo governor, to leave her position there 3 months before the election and to actually return to national politics. So, with this in mind, do you think that we're going to have, well, if of course PM Kishida calls for a general election after the DC visit, Washington DC visit, do you think that we are going to see several, actually a couple of female candidates for prime minister soon, or at least by the end of this year? I don't know. So,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on this?
it's a great question. So first of all, we don't know what the governor of Tokyo is going to do. She doesn't have to announce it to anybody until the 15th, when she announces her candidacy to run for, the vacant seat in Tokyo 15. So I think she would probably keep her powder dry, unlike uh, let me see, there's Sanai Takeichi, who's formed a policy group to promote her candidacy. Prematurely, of course, but she's already developing that. In order to run for prime minister, you have to have 20 members of the Diet sign your petition. So she's on her way to do that already. The last time we had the election, there were 2 women and 2 men that ran for prime minister. The 2 women were eliminated in the runoff. We talked about this just last week. And I think this time you're going to have at least 2 women again. Both of the former candidates will run again. And you might have a third woman running, because I think if Ms. Koike decides to run for the lower house seat in Tokyo 15, the only reason she would do that is to become prime minister. She's 71 years old. She's still got things that she wants to achieve, things she wants to do. I don't know. For me, I would prefer to be governor of Tokyo rather than prime minister. But even just thinking about becoming prime minister, the fight that you would have to go through, and maybe the timing is right. Akira Ogawa just won the Maiba mayoral election. She's an incumbent. She's new to the job. She beat out the 4-time incumbent, 64-year-old guy who was supported by the LDP. And the LDP owns Gunma. I mean, the Ishin and the opposition parties don't stand a chance in Gunma. In other districts, they do. Gunma's produced 4 prime ministers. So yeah, I think we're seeing this. I mean, JAL also appointed as CEO their first woman chief representative. So there's a lot going on socially and politically. The problem that we have is that in the lower levels, in the key spots, to satisfy the requirements of the government to have somebody on the board that's a female by 2025, if you are listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, but it doesn't fill much into the managerial role. So I do see that the age of women being more involved and taking on more executive leadership roles is upon us. I just, there's a lag there in getting them up through the managerial roles.
Right. Yes. Well, hopefully we'll be seeing more women, as you mentioned, in managerial positions, also leadership positions. But once again, I think that we are getting back to the issue with training and actually helping the women in business and also politics. More women in politics and business, well, gain those skills. Even though I do, yes, I'm really, very optimistic about this, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so thank you for that, Timothy. And we have a couple of questions actually on LinkedIn. So the first comment, and also, it's followed up by a question. is, well, it comes from Camilo Sandoval, and I'm going to read it to you. So it's a little bit long, not too much anyway. So please listen carefully, okay? So concerns about President Biden's memory and age intensified after a report criticized his handling of classified documents and noted his significant memory lapses. This raises questions about whether these issues will overshadow Prime Minister Kishida's state visit amidst growing calls for Biden not to seek re-election. Could this be seen as a liability, especially if no policy wins are achieved? Your
What a
thoughts on?
great what a great question. This has been on my mind too. You're the prime minister of Japan and you're putting a lot of marbles in this bag that you're going to go to Washington D.C. You're going to have a state visit with Joe Biden, the most powerful person on the globe. You're going to get your picture taken, you're going to come home victoriously and you're going to call for the election. That's a lot of expectations. And it is just as likely for him to go to Washington, D.C., and it not to go that way. The prime minister saying something or doing something, or something happens at the time when the prime minister is there on a state visit, and that sucks in all the news. And nobody even thinks about, the Japanese prime minister was in Washington, D.C. That's a likely scenario, too. There's a lot going on in Washington, D.C., and even the reporters are now beginning to um, attack is not the right word, but to really put the screws to the the president. They did this just the other day at a impromptu press conference, and yeah, I don't know, but I've also read the report that what's going on in the United States intimidates and scares the hell out of everybody else in the world, and
Okay.
that's because yes, and that's because the prospect between having Joe Biden continue as president compared to the prospect of having Donald Trump return to the presidency, those two scenarios present such a vastly different picture to the world and to Americans. I think the election is just going to be really, really a vicious fight. We can all anticipate that. And as I've said before, there will come a time when people need to um, claim, who they actually stand for, because otherwise they'll be canceled or people will criticize them. They'll be intimidated into some position or another because the fight is so real and it's, the consequences are so dire. So it's it's going to be a very interesting year, not just for Japanese politics, but globally and for the United States in their election cycle. So yeah, with the prime minister visiting Joe Biden and Joe Biden suffering sometimes with these slip ups, yeah, it's anybody's guess how that's going to work out.
Right. So there is, as you said, a lot to see about or to watch out for at this point of time. And who knows, maybe next week we'll have even more things, to talk about in terms of external politics and geopolitics. Who knows? All right. And then let me continue then with LinkedIn. So we have a question there from Rumiko, who writes, talking about Osaka Banpaku, are the budget mentioned? Okay, the budget you mentioned, is it the national budget or is Osaka prefecture's budget?
Okay, it's there are three parts of the budget that pay for the Osaka Expo.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it comes from Osaka, part of it comes from the national government, and then part of it comes from corporations in Osaka that want to contribute and burnish their image. They want to have a pavilion too. So there are three sources, but I think the national government, the prime minister's office, allocates money, and they have a higher percentages. I think Osaka doesn't pay 1/3. I think the central government pays more than 1/3, and that's why they have so much of an ability to call the shots there. It's not just the governor of Osaka that's behind this. I think the central government the um, has the upper hand there.
Okay, yes, thanks for that too. Um, the Osaka government and the budget. Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry, I was just multitasking behind the scenes. And then we have another a couple of questions actually. So one of them comes from YouTube, and it is from Hiroaki. So why doesn't Prime Minister Kishida announce a grand Kochikai? This will send a message for the renewal of LDP, and probably a message for winning the election. Either Biden or Trump comes, well, whoever comes in the future, the Tokyo Bay APEC Expo is key. Do you have
Uh,
any thoughts on this?
Number one, Hiroaki should run for prime minister. Number two, uh, that question contains like 16 different things that are really important to talk about. The central part of the question is why doesn't Mr. Kishida start a new faction that maybe is the same name and relaunch it, reinvigorate it? And I think that's probably in the cards. I think that might happen with the other factions, but probably it's going to be a different kind of name. I mean, the legacy helps, but I think there's also a lot of baggage there too. So I think the factions will reemerge. It's just an essential component of money and politics. I mean, money helps politics get done, and the urge to get things done is so tempting to politicians and so important to corporations. It's awful hard. It's not like it used to be during the Tanaka years and soon after that, but it was cleaned up a lot. You've got the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the United States and similar acts throughout throughout the world. Whether it's observed or whether it has teeth in it is a different matter. But even the Japanese have their own version of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that applies to Japanese citizens participating in the political process, asking for favors, and then having some sort of a reciprocal, you do this for me and I'll do this for you. I think eliminating that from politics, I think the human spirit is too weak. And so you just have to have laws and disclosure and transparency to allow for it in at a certain degree, because it's going to happen anyway. But with regard to the factions, I think that's one of the reasons why they existed and became so popular, is because they could collect money for the members, and then from the leadership of the faction, they could distribute it. They could have oversight of who's in trouble, who's going to win, who's really having trouble. They can spend more money. They can send more people. They can have more of the prime minister or the minister of state visiting and talking on behalf of that candidate and really helping them win the election. So I think the form and the fashion of factions will change, but I think it's I think it's going to, like the question suggests, it's going to be a little bit of the same all over again.
Okay, well, this doesn't sound actually very optimistic.
But
And
we run into this all the time, Maya. We always hope for change. We hope that there's an opportunity that comes up, and then we say, now it's going to change. Now it's going to happen. And here in Japan, I mean, if you've lived in Japan for any length of time, this has happened to you, where your expectations are just dashed. The prime minister says one thing, but he does another thing. He says he's going to provide the names. He doesn't provide the names. Nobody gets into trouble. Nobody goes to jail. It just and the thing just keeps repeating itself over and over again. But it's not just in politics; it's also in business too. You want to have something change. It just never comes out the way you want it to. On the other hand, there are things that change in Japanese society or in agriculture or architecture. I mean, the cityscape changes constantly. So yeah, there are things that change quicker than you expect, but there are some things that just really are really tenacious.
yes, I agree with you, but at the same time, even though we people here, I mean, of course, the foreigners who live in Japan and the local Japanese people, everybody expect this something to change, and it doesn't. Maybe at the same time, that's why Japan has been, I mean, this, how can I put it, the Japanese society and the politics and the country as a whole has been so stable. I don't know how to express it really,
Yeah.
because There are some positives to this as well. I don't want to be, accused of being overly optimistic, but still there are positives to I mean, to all this inertia. I'm not saying that it is all good, of course. We want change, and it is definitely necessary and due, long time due. But still, how what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we see that all the time, especially like in like cybersecurity or in protecting state secrets, that sort of thing. The Japanese are really uh, years behind the other countries in terms of protecting their secrets, protecting data. Even within companies, security is so lax. I think uh, I wish there was maybe a website that focused on who was getting hacked, who was getting ransomware, who was had their systems crash, because I think it would be an interesting barometer of what's actually happening here. And I think it happens a lot here in Japan. It happens in other countries too. But I mean, there are some countries, North Korea, China, who have the Philippines too, who have floors of people who are working on computers to try and invade other people's security or their to crash their systems or to get their data and make money off of it. I mean, it's Japan is a real hotbed of activity. I wish there was more transparency there, but it's one of the things that holds Japan back, and it's one of those things, as you said, it's just hard to get Japan to change and to gear up. It has some great aspects, but in the current environment geopolitically, it's hard. I mean, even Five Eyes, the Five Eyes information sharing among the five major countries, they don't include Japan in sharing because Japan is there's too many holes and too many leaks, and there's not enough confidence or security in the way um, uh, data and security is followed here. So people are worried that if they share the secrets that the Five Eyes have, it will eventually go into North Korea's or China's or even Russia's arms. And Japan is just in such a delicate place. There's China, there's North Korea, and there's Russia, all surrounding this region here, and it's a intelligence trove for these enemies of the state. So I don't know what the fix is there.
All right. That's probably another issue we have to watch out for. Yes, okay, so thank you for that. And I'm going to Clubhouse now. There we have a comment from Janusz about the visit of PM Kishida to Washington, D.C. And Janusz shared that, just a moment, let me find it. Okay. Can I find it? Maybe it,
Janusz?
yes, maybe it has been, just a moment, please. Okay. It looks like we are stuck on Clubhouse again. So it's not moving. But basically, okay, so Janusz was saying that the main objective of the visit of PM Kishida should be his visiting the Congress, because the leader of South Korea, and also he mentioned, I think maybe Vietnam, they visited the Congress, and now it is PM Kishida's turn. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think an address to Congress is appropriate and is should be a part of the state visit. I'm not in on the scheduling, um, so I can't comment very much on that. But I will point out that the day that the state visit starts, April 10th, is also the day of elections in South Korea. So President Yoon goes up for re-election on the 10th. So it's going to be a big news day on that day. The the way appropriate way to unify the country is through war, through force, and this is a change in policy. He just announced this last week, and so the change in attitude in North Korea and South Korea is really beginning. I mean, it's ratcheting up so tightly. So as we move into this year, it's not just Biden Kishida. I mean, there's a lot going on, and I'm afraid it's going to culminate just at the time when the prime minister is in Washington D.C. So who knows what's going to happen?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for that, Clubhouse. Hopefully it is working. Yeah, Yuka, it's not. I think that I'm in Clubhouse and I can see everybody else there. So hopefully you can come back into the room and join the session again. I hope that everybody else is still there because that's what I can see on my screen. And going back to LinkedIn, Timothy, there we are. Once again, looking at the comment from Rumiko. And so she writes, I have read in the news that the chairman, the woman chairman, lady chairman of the Japanese lawyers committee, Nichi Benren, is the first top lady of the Bengoshi organization, saying that. So she's saying that her first priority is to change the rules of having different surnames for married couples. Have you heard about this in the cabinet in accordance with political circumstances?
I've been following the issue. I haven't followed the issue recently, but yes, there's a big push so that when a female marries a male in Japan, she is not she's not required to change her name. Under current law, she takes the last name and goes on to the koseki of the husband, of the male part of that. And there's been a lot of um, enthusiasm to change that, to give better equality, to not make that distinction. But this is an issue that really goes pretty deep into Japanese culture and Japanese psychology, because the family register is where these changes are made, and in law, the woman becomes part of the husband's family. So she actually leaves the koseki of her birth and goes into the koseki of her husband. So changing the name, I think, would complicate that. And also, there's a psychology that goes along with this too. That's just seeped in Japanese history. Um, I, on one hand, you think it's not such a difficult thing to achieve. Why not allow for it? But I think politically, it's a big issue. There's probably not enough support, and the LDP is much more conservative on these issues. I didn't know that she had been elected to Nichi Benren, the Association of Japanese Lawyers, or the Bar Association. So congratulations to her. But this sort of thing is happening all over, isn't it?
Yes, it is indeed. Okay, yes, thank you. And well, if you don't mind me, I'm going to go back to Clubhouse now. Yuka is there. Yuka, hello to you. I hope that you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. I can hear you very well too. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, we're doing AT&T commercial again. I'm sorry, maybe this is only a US joke.
Okay.
So I have the brief comment. Timothy, you always say, Kono Taro is an excellent English speaker. And I watched his YouTube video addressing like the US the press, and you're right. His English was excellent, and he was making a joke. And yeah, I kind of recommend, if you have nothing else to do, please go and watch Kono Taro, making a joke in English. But anyway, I have a question, serious question. Today, maybe I'm the only one who found this, but that the Japan's largest trade partner is China. Nothing new, right?
Right.
But I just noticed the third largest is Taiwan. So what I'm to get at it is how Japan is sort of like a balancing this. It's like a stupid question. Hello?
No, it's not a stupid question. I'm just scratching my head, trying to. I mean, the first thing that came in to my mind was the balance of payments and the surplus or the the debt that different companies accumulate. But with Taiwan, I'm not sure what the trade flow is. If there's somebody else that's in the room that's listening to us, that's maybe with the embassy, please let us know. The trade flows between Japan and Taiwan. The first thing that comes to mind are chips and condensers, that sort of thing. But I think that doesn't cover the whole area. It's a bit of a mystery to me. Their third largest trading partner is Taiwan. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, no, actually, when I mean to say what's balancing, meaning it's not really the accounting balance, meaning like the tension between China and and then like the Taiwan, and the second largest partner is the U.S. And it seems like Japan is really the rock in a hard place. You cannot, you have to please China, but you need to sort of work with Taiwan as well, right?
That's right.
So that's what, yeah.
So TSMC just announced that they're going to build a second wafer plant, a second chip plant in Kumamoto. They announced this last week. So that's another big investment, but it's also, you could read it as a precursor. People who know, not like us, but people who really know, are making plans for the inevitable, that Taiwan will collapse, that the factories will be destroyed, and they need to put their factories in a safer place. Kumamoto is good enough, and so spread it out and spread your risks. This is a big deal for Taiwan to be exporting their technology and making production overseas, but they're doing it in the United States as well. But yeah, I think maybe people have decided that eventually, if China wants Taiwan, they're going to get it one way or the other. So we need to be prepared for that. So although it's a 20-year plan, let's not put all our eggs in a Taiwan basket. But yeah, it is somewhat unsettling. And there are many people that have predicted this is the year, or within 2 years, Taiwan will be invaded by China. And that's why the United States is ramping up. And that's why there's so much going on in Okinawa and in South Korea, and the joint exercises and the SOFA, the Status of Forces Agreement between Japan and many other countries, how that has mushroomed over the last 18 months. It used to be just the United States enjoyed that privilege. So there's a lot going on, and the tensions are palpable.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that perspective, because I thought that those TSMC was just, Japanese government wanting the technology in Japan because, there are revival of Japanese semiconductor industry. When you look at those, the Nikkei stocks. But anyway, I didn't realize that, political aspect of it. But so thank you.
Oh yeah, I think the Japanese government has enticed Taiwan to do that. They're offering a lot of money. Please move your factory here. We will open up a Taiwanese children's school. We'll open up housing. We'll help you transfer your laborers here. We'll get more people to work with you who are technically competent. That sort of thing. So it's a big sales job. It's economic development for Kumamoto, but it's also, a smart security move on behalf of Taiwan, but also Japan as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuka. Yes. And Timothy, we have a couple of other comments. We have also one question actually from last week, which was put up there on YouTube during the week. And it is about the female leader of the Japan Communist Party, about her views and the role, her leadership of the Communist Party. But I think that we can talk about this next time, so that, probably we can touch upon it in a little bit more depth. Sorry. So, and then here we go.
Okay, wait. So since the issue came up, who asked the question?
So it is, yes, a person whose handle name on YouTube is Nana.
Nana?
Yes.
Okay.
N-A-N-A, yes.
Okay, Nana. It's interesting when you bring up the Japanese Communist Party that they have a new female leader. It looks like it's the flavor of the month that we have women involved in senior levels of business and sometimes in government too. And I hope it's not the flavor of the month. I hope it continues on. It needs to continue on. But in the Japanese Communist Party, the members don't elect their leaders. They're communists, so they don't have elections. They don't have the votes like that. The party leaders are selected by the party leadership, and Mr. Shi was the president of the Japanese Communist Party, and he held several positions at the same time, and he has relinquished one position to this female to be the president of the Japanese Communist Party. But he did say in making the announcement that, but she's going to be the president. She's handling all domestic issues politically for the party, but I still retain my position as the supreme leader of the Japanese Communist Party. So it's a little bit concealed if you don't follow the words pretty carefully. So he's still there. He's still the top dog, but now they've got a woman who is the leader, and I think they've done that for, for political reasons, for vote, for the sake of, attracting more voters and being more appealing party. So I just want to throw that in.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. I hope that this answered the questions, Nana. If you have others, please let us know during the coming week, and we'll address them too. So, Timothy, once again, back to Clubhouse. We have Patrick Paulus. That is maybe a little bit, a personal question, and then something that we haven't talked about much. So Patrick writes, Tim, I heard you grew up in Okinawa. I was there once and I was taken aback by a strange looking aircraft that flies around there. It was, just a moment, sorry. Okay. It was so weird and foreboding for me that I thought it was an alien aircraft at first. For years, that experience left me wondering if there was ever a public health study done regarding the psychological impact of the industrial design of that machine on the locals' well-being.
Interesting question. This is Patrick?
Patrick, yes.
Yeah, well, hi, Patrick. I'm glad you lived in Okinawa. Okinawa is a very, very special place. I lived there from the time I was maybe 11 years old until I was 16. I left when I was 16 in 1969. And this aircraft that you're talking about, they have two versions of the SR.
Timothy, yes? Just a moment. Could you please try to speak a little bit louder?
Me?
Yes, you.
You're not catching this?
Oh, this is much better now. So
okay.
Yes, thank you.
How about that? Sorry. This aircraft is the fastest aircraft in the world, the SR-71, also known as the habu. So the habu is a poisonous snake in Okinawa. And I think the station for this SR-71, there's a fleet of them, but I think the habu are stationed in Okinawa. I saw these airplanes when I was a kid growing up. They're the fastest airplane currently in the world. This is in 1965. They were they were beyond UFO status. We could see them, and some of the kids that I was going to school with, their fathers were pilots of this plane. But this is a spy plane. It flies, at Mach 3. Yeah, it's a UFO looking aircraft, but yeah, it had a big impact on me when I saw it, because we would lay down on the grass and watch it take off, and sometimes come in landing too. Psychological impact, I don't know if it had much of a psychological impact, but it was just something cool and alien looking. But we knew what it was. It was a spy plane. It was just a way ahead of its times. For the Okinawans, for the Ryukyus who lived there, I don't know if there was much of a, there might have been a psychological impact study that was done because of the SR-71s being stationed there. But I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'm not going to volunteer to look into it for you, but
Right. It's an interesting question. I have never heard of such a study. So just for what it is worth. And of course, I have to say that I haven't looked for any such studies before. So yes. Okay. Thanks a lot.
so that was the personal part. He had a more political question too.
No, that's the actually the question, the part about the study. Yes,
Okay.
yes, it was the one. Okay, so and then just a moment, we got somebody on LinkedIn. Okay, so from Akira Tokuhiro. So the question is, in your expert opinion, which scenario 1 to 5 has the highest probability of occurring in 2024? That is of all the issues. I am not sure that I understand the question actually. So if you can help us a little bit with with details about this, what you mean. Let's see.
I think he's probably asking about the snap election.
I guess that is, yes, that is the question about, but yeah,
If he comes back to you, let me just answer, assuming that's the question.
okay. Yeah.
And it's very difficult for me to predict because even like I said earlier, Maya and I had a conversation that was distinctly different just from week to week about what's going on in Japanese politics. A conversation that we wouldn't have conceived of having 2 months ago. We're talking about now the dissolution of political factions and people being arrested for stuffing their breast pocket with cash because they've been involved in a kickback scandal. Just Japanese politics is in such flux right now. It's hard to predict. I mean, I don't. I think even the prime minister or Governor Koike is also just kind of wondering what to do. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? That's why when Dan and I had our conversation, what was it? Maybe 10 days ago, Maya. The title of
Yes.
that was Kishida's Gamble. Actually, it was Kishida's Gambles. We should have had plural there because even when we designed the webinar, it was Kishida's Gamble. Is he going to disband the factions? Is he going to disband his own faction? And then the second gamble came up after we had planned this talk, and it was, is he going to call the snap election to coincide with the by-election on April 28th? So it's really in flux, and I think that's why it makes this show so interesting and so vital to kind of be on top of it, because things are changing. Things are changing very rapidly, and you need to be up to speed and understand why it's happening and what's the sequence of things that are happening, so that you too can also predict, with some degree of accuracy rather than just guessing how things are going to turn out. The relationship between Japan and the United States is so important, politically, geopolitically, militarily, that what goes on in the United States is very important to the Japanese, and what's going on in Japan is very important to the leaders in Washington D.C. Not so much the average American, but Japan is on everybody's mind. It's a cool place. People who visit here like it, and there's a great affinity between the two countries. So it's very hard to predict. It's a very uncomfortable time for political analysts to come up with a scenario that's and who wants to be wrong by guessing. It's just not a good gamble to guess at this point in time.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for answering the question. We got some feedback, a follow up from Mr. Takuhiro Akira. So the following question is: my question was at higher level. Japanese politics is local, yet there are G7 and Asia Pacific issues, security, Taiwan, etc. What low probability event, high consequence, may occur in 2024, the next 10 months of the year?
Immediately, what comes to mind is North Korea, missile launches, and also as tensions increase, the participation of the Japan self-defense forces in joint exercises should there be an accident involving self-defense forces personnel, I think that would change the situation very quickly. If there was a self-defense forces individual who was who killed or died somehow in not in action, but as a consequence of the tensions that are being that we're all experiencing, or similarly from a missile shot by North Korea, something happens there, maybe debris falls in Japanese waters, or much more remotely actually hitting somebody and killing them. That would be a really big deal. And then finally, I think I think it's mostly North Korea that has me worried because of the rhetoric that's coming out of there. The fact that they've got these submarines now, they've got underwater drones that are nuclear armed, supposedly. There's a lot that's going on there, and they're being used by Russia as a kind of a surrogate for actions that Russia wants to impose on the United States through Japan. So it's very complicated, but the tensions are very high too. So it's difficult to predict. But if I was pushed to guess, I would say that it's probably something like that would really shake the world. But you never know. Just keep tuned to this program, because we talk about it every week.
Right, indeed. We talk about this, we follow the news and things that are going to come in the news to be announced there later. So, well, stay with us. We're here every Sunday morning at 8:20, and I can see that, yes, Timothy Langley is already getting ready, to go back to work.
Yes.
A different kind of work this time. So
working it's a 3-day weekend, Maya. Everybody knows it's a 3-day weekend, right?
Yes, everybody knows. Yes.
The reason why I look like this is because I'm basically in work clothes. Worked all day yesterday, worked into the night. We'll work all day today and all day Monday, and then the authorities from the Japan Coast Guard will come by and check the boat and see if it's seaworthy, and if we've been successful, they will give us the license so that this boat can sail. And once we do that, then we go into a different gear. But right now we're just working hard to get the licensing requirements satisfied.
Right.
Whew.
Okay. That's something, isn't it? Okay, and then so with this, I think that we can safely say that, or safely let you go actually and help Captain Burkowski work on his on his boat, so that hopefully, he gets he gets the license and he can sail his boat. Oh, that's the boat.
Yeah.
So many ropes up there.
Oh, let me see.
Yes, you can see that on YouTube and also LinkedIn. Nice, looking nice. I imagine that it will look much better by the end.
It's got to look much better. It's kind of a workstation right now, but the sails are down. The sails are being refurbished. That'll take maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's being changed, and it's 44 years old, so it's well past time that things should have been refurbished for it. So it's a great project.
A great project indeed. Yes. Okay, that's wonderful. So with this, Timothy, yes, I can see how happy you are. Good. All right. So again, thank you very much, and to everybody who stayed with us. Thanks a lot for keeping up, also for listening until the end. It's very important. Yes, what's that laughter?
No, yes, thanks for staying until the end. But, even for those of you just sign on at the very beginning because you want to see what Tim says to Maya and how Maya is going to tell Tim, please calm down or something like that. And then everybody goes on, they just listen in the background. But thank you very much. If you stick on the channel, you're watching the annex here, you watch me stumble through my words and my notes. We appreciate that. But we also follow up with the synopsis that you're getting every week too. So if you're not able to participate, or it's too much time for you to devote to it, we try and keep you updated with the synopsis that goes out. What, Maya? Every Thursday or Friday?
Yes, every Thursday or Friday, sometimes Saturday as well. But it's always there. So thanks to your hard work. And thank you very much for that. Okay, that's all for today. To everybody, thanks a lot again. And enjoy the remainder of the weekend.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maya. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank
Ooh,
you.
look
Enjoy
at this.
the weekend.
Yes.